Hey guys, welcome back to the Hobby Drop. So this week we're going to take this and we're going to turn it into this. I know it looks fairly simple, but there's some really core techniques that I really want to run through in this piece, including how to change the shape of a part, how to remove detail that you don't like or fill it in, and most importantly, how to use templates to create mirrored and symmetrical scribing and detailing work. So enough waffling, let's go build something. Hey guys, so I actually missed a couple of steps at the very start of this with photos. I kind of worked on the other shin and wasn't happy with it, so I started again with this and I was kind of playing with it. So I didn't really take photos. What I'm going to do now is just show you the two things that I did. One was simply cut flush the front part of this little circle bit right here. After that I basically filled it with CA glue, sanded it back, CA glue being any kind of standard super glue. I filed that down specifically because it didn't really suit the design of the suit, either how I did it or how I wanted it to look. The second thing I did was I wanted to make the edges of this shin far more rigid. I did that again because the lines that I've been designing and working through were a far more rigid design, right? It was more boxy and square than it was rounded, so the rounding parts had to go. What I did to achieve this was I would take, I guess, rough cuts or raw cuts with a slightly dull craft knife down the center line of the round part here, and then I would use the side of the blade, just any crappy old blade, to really scrape it down until I saw some kind of flat or sharp surface. I then flipped the blade, but so the edge of the blade came over the other flat surface. I'll try and illustrate that here. And I just kept scraping down until I got the rough shape I wanted, and then I just went back and sanded it. Use a really low grit sandpaper to get the rough shape together, and then you just smooth it out with some nice high grit sandpaper of your choice. And that's where we start on this piece. So now it's nicely shaped how I want it. I then started sketching in the rough idea of what I wanted for panel lines and the shape of the shin itself. In this instance, I knew I really wanted to cut the top off, A, because the top of it made it kind of look like an animated frog, and B, because again I wanted a shorter, sharper, more boxy or square visual to the shins itself. So then what I do is I tend to sketch what I need and mark it with a piece of scribing tape. Now, rather than just hacking at this with a saw or a knife like you normally would, typically what I do is I use an old scribing tool to get a really sharp and clear line where I want to cut first, and I'll go really deep. If I can't cut through it entirely with the scribing tool, I just use a crappy old one. I then finish it off with a knife, but the first part is always using that tool to get a really sharp, clear and consistent line. What often happens when you use a saw or a knife first up is that you actually remove a lot of material at the point you're measuring. So when you go and do it on another side, for instance, you're actually down by that amount, and sometimes it doesn't line up. So I tend to use the tape as a marker, scribe it in as much as possible. If I can't cut it with that, then I finish it off with a knife, do that on both sides, and it's a consistent cut every time. So now you can see the top is cut off, it's nice and smooth and sanded and filed down, and you can see the happy frog face down on the ground. Now the scribe that I did along the trim of my shins was using this tool, which we sell on the Hobby Drop. You can actually mimic this functionality by very carefully gluing a blade to a piece of plastic card, or I've seen people use a screwdriver with a lock nut, or I think MadWorks actually sells a tool that's very similar. This one's easy and you can use it for a bunch of other stuff, so I just use this. And what I do with this is I gently drag it along the marked position at a fixed width, and you'll see that it's fairly consistent across the board. And once I do that a few times and get a rough mark in place, I then go and tidy it up with a scribing chisel to get a nice sharp line. Now normally I would flip the piece, work on the scribe on the other side, and then connect the flat connecting part in the middle like this. But because this tool is so consistent, I could just carry on down this way and then down into the side the other side of the scribe, which made it super easy and fast. Now, if you haven't figured it out by now, I love to use something simple like a piece of tape to judge a distance or add some detail. And what I've done in this instance is I've just used a piece of 3mm tape here and placed it along the side and then added another line. And I did that because I want to mimic or have an easily recognizable feature on all of the leg parts that work cohesively. You'll see where I've mimicked this design later on in the suit once we go forwards with these videos. Ideally they'll all work together in unison and it won't look hideous, so let's find out. So I'm a big believer in scribing around the side of panels that you scribe, purely because it looks far more believable when you look at it and the light catches it. There's a small piece missing. It looks like the panel's popping out. Now, the reason I included this shot is to show you what not to do, because I see a lot of people doing this. Please don't bend your tape around corners. I know it feels like it should sit better, but what it does is it creates small little gaps right here and here, and you end up just getting shit stuck in them, and it ruins the line or it moves the tape. Where possible, place the tape flat against the edge and then scribe just like you normally would on a panel. If you're finding it wiggles or it moves too much, then just use a thicker piece of tape and then move it up to get your bottom line. What I tend to do is sketch all over the piece to try and help me visualize what would look best. In this instance, I didn't know whether I wanted to cut the shin even lower or just detail the rim of it. I opted for this top part here, and that's what we're going to work through now. So then it's just like the foot. Cover it in CA glue, probably too much, a little bit too much, right? Much too much. Then slap a spare piece of pla plate on there, hold it till it dries, and then we can work on trimming it up. So flip it over and then start cutting carefully along here. Now what I would suggest is that you cut slightly higher than the edge of the piece, using your finger or the blade to guide along the piece, and then gently sand it back until it's completely flush. That just avoids the inevitable slip up and gouging into your actual part. Like so. Looks nice and flush. So then we can progress by flipping it back over, and now we can start planning out the initial piece that we wanted to cut off in the first place. And you guessed it, we just sketch that bad boy back in, and then we mark it with some tape and we scribe it down. So I just use a scribing tool again to cut it as flush as possible, and I work all the way back until just about hitting the actual part, and then I'll just go in with a sharp knife and I'll gently rock the blade along the scribe line until the part gives, and then we just repeat the same for the next angle. Nice and easy. And then you have your fixed scribing template. So it's as simple as we did on the foot, where we scribe around this template until we get deep enough that we can actually snap the piece off. So this is almost a combination of the technique we learned for making the plate in the foot video and for reshaping plastic parts that we learned at the start of this one. And it's the same deal. Flip it over, glue it on, scribe it, pop this piece off, and now we're completely symmetrical. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I really hope you learned something from it. So if you like it, like, subscribe, all that good nonsense, or just flick me a comment and tell me you did or didn't like it. Thanks. See ya. Footage was lost. To learn, I'm happy with. Defeatist. Whoa, look at how massive my forehead is. Watch. Lines. Yikes. What is that? That's the sound on this term. Biggy diggy big beep big meep. Okay, cool. In my case, just like in the foot demonstration, I use a scribing tool basically to dig my way through this until I'm happy with the shape of it. I didn't explain any of that in the foot, did I? So then it's a really easy technique that I like to do for a lot of things actually, which is not explain it.